Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to break a trauma bond with the narcissist. Stay tuned. So today's video is a request I've had from several of my subscribers on how to break a trauma bond with a narcissist. In this video, I'm going to give a little bit of background on what a trauma bond is, but I'm not going to go into extreme explicit detail because I already do have another older video that I made on trauma bonds and what is all composed of a trauma bond, how they're created, how they're maintained. And I'll make sure that I link that below in case you want to check that video out, and I would recommend doing so in addition to this video. So trauma bonds are really what causes people to remain stuck in narcissistic, toxic, abusive relationships. It's really the underlying mechanism on how these relationships continue to be maintained. A trauma bond is really the psychological conditioning that happens in an abusive relationship. And if we take a look at the abuse cycle, it makes sense on how this mechanism tends to happen. So at the beginning of the abuse cycle, we usually have the honeymoon phase. This is a phase where the relationship is established, it's built off of this wonderful, blissful period. A lot of people say this type of relationship is nothing like they've ever had before. They're given attention, they're given gifts, they're given praise, they're given value. This can happen for an unspecified amount of time. Every relationship is different. But the overall idea is that abusive relationships don't necessarily start out abusive, and most times they do not. This eventually leads to the tension building phase, and eventually after that, the devaluation phase that we see in the abuse cycle. During the devaluation phase is when our self-esteem is picked apart, our self-worth is picked apart, the abuse is actively occurring in the relationship dynamic. And with narcissists especially, this is quite sneaky and manipulative because it doesn't happen overnight. It's usually devaluation in narcissistic relationships is something that happens systematically over time. And with narcissism, this can be extremely difficult because it's so systematic and happens so slowly over time that the narcissists, they convince us that we need them, that they're the only ones that are going to accept us, and they're really excellent at cutting us off from our support systems, our friends, our family. We come to rely on them. I once heard someone say that this is the one person that can break me down, and they're also the only person that is able to build me up. So we really become psychologically conditioned in these relationships. We become conditioned to seek out the rewarding parts, the parts that are good, the parts that feel good to us, because at this point it's the only thing that can make us feel good. This develops into a bond that's very addictive in nature and very hard to break out of. In fact, I'll go on record as saying that this is one of the hardest things that I ever had to do personally was to break a trauma bond with a narcissist in my life. However, it is possible, and it is my hope in this video that I can offer you some tips and suggestions to help break the trauma bond with your narcissist. Before I get into the tips, there are a couple things I want to mention beforehand. The first thing I want to mention is that I realize that every situation is different. No relationship is the same. Everyone has different levels to access to resources and a support system. These tips are just a generalized blueprint of what I think is helpful for people in the situation in which they want to break a trauma bond with a narcissist. In all of my videos in the description box, I do have resources or access to resources for domestic violence. So make sure that you check that out if you do need additional support in your situation. The second thing is I don't want to underplay how difficult it is to break a trauma bond with a narcissist. It is extremely emotionally taxing, difficult. You feel an array of emotions. It's basically pretty much on the same level as breaking any other type of addiction. And with that, it's important to realize that it might not be perfect. There might be times that you screw up, that you contact the narcissist, that you respond to the narcissist. That, in my mind, is actually to be expected when going through this cycle. Lapses are very common. The idea is that this is something that we continue to work at, we continue to get better, and we continue to try harder. So without further ado, here are my tips and tricks to help break a bond with a narcissist. My first tip is that we really need to recognize what we're dealing with. So that means becoming as educated as we can on narcissism. The games that they play, the things that they say. If someone has high in traits of narcissism, these end up being fairly predictable patterns over time. So really becoming as educated as we can in their cycles, in their persona, in their psyche is really one of our best weapons in defense against a narcissist. And I have an entire playlist devoted to education on narcissism right on my channel for you guys to check out. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't yet, because I also have a lot of other future video plans talking more about narcissism and narcissists as a whole. In addition to that, there's a lot of other amazing channels on narcissism, a lot of really good blogs out there, and books as well. I often recommend books in my description box, so make sure you check that out as well. The biggest thing for me when it came to educating myself on narcissism was when I started to read on how they can't change. The probability of a narcissist changing is very, very low, and if you've been watching my videos for a while, you know how outspoken I am on this topic. Narcissists don't tend to change, at least not in the long term. Yes, they can make short-term changes, they can modify their behaviors. This is usually when they're trying to pull you back because they're afraid of losing their supply. And this is actually one of the reinforcement mechanisms behind a trauma bond. I really had to look at my life and realize that if I didn't change something, if I didn't make the choice to leave, that I was going to have to continue the same cycles that I have been living that were making me so miserable, that were making me not be able to even recognize myself when I looked in the mirror. And I had to basically be very strong in that moment and choose myself, because if I didn't choose myself, I was going to have to continue to relive the same cycles over and over again without there really being any possibility that it's ever going to change. Understanding narcissistic supply is another really important part of understanding narcissists. Understand that they need supply, and that you being their partner, their child, someone they're close to, you're that main source of supply for them. So when you cut off that source of supply, it makes sense for them to act differently, to try to pull you back in. Narcissists are excellent at hoovering. They want to pull you back into the relationship because they don't want to lose that source of supply. So when I recognized that A, narcissists don't change typically, and B, I was nothing more than a source of supply for someone else, that gave me enough strength to choose myself and figuring out a way to overcome it, which can definitely be one of the most difficult parts. I don't want to undersell that. But that was what started the whole process for me. My second tip is to practice acceptance and willingness. Now, why is it this own tip? It seems pretty standard. Well, when ending a trauma bond, a lot of the choice does lie on you. Basically, all of the choice relies on you to make the choice to end the trauma bond. The narcissist is not going to let you go freely. They're going to continue to try to continue to get that source of supply any means that they can. They don't leave quietly. If anything, they tend to get louder and more abusive when you are showing signs that are leaving, or you're actually leaving, or even after you've left, they can continue to really wreak havoc on your life. So there has to be acceptance that this is happening, and that I'm willingly making the choice to break this trauma bond. We have to psychologically be at that point. Not that it's going to be easy, not that we're going to feel emotions, not that we're most definitely going to create the relationship. We're going to feel sadness. We're going to have days that we want it back. We want that rush back. It's going to happen. But willingness to really stick it in there, to really stick to the boundaries that you create, which I'm going to get into in a second. The willingness to really remain no contact, if that's the method that we're choosing to go. The willingness to really do something different behaviorally in this situation, even if we're not always feeling like doing it. And again, there are going to be days where we might mess up. There's going to be lapses. There's going to be times that we give in. That is the name of the game, and breaking a trauma bond with a narcissist, absolutely. But the willingness to continue to work on it is a choice, and it is a choice I would highly recommend that anyone watching this video that's is in a situation where they want to break their trauma bond really takes into consideration. The second thing is separation. Physically and emotionally separating ourselves from the narcissist. The best way to do that is the no contact method. Absolutely, 110% support this method. If you are able to go completely no contact with a narcissist, this is the best way to break down that trauma bond. And no contact really means no contact. That means that we not only are we blocking their number and not responding to messages, we're also not following them on social media. Sometimes this requires us to cut other people out of our life that are associated in a positive way with the narcissist, that might relay information to the narcissist. It could even involve legal assistance, like a no contact order, an order of protection. If the narcissist continues to try to find avenues to contact us, it might have to go there. Really doing whatever we can do to not have any contact with the narcissist. And I do recognize and realize that this is not always possible in every situation, and that Sometimes we are co-parenting with a narcissist and we have to have some type of communication because we share children together. In fact, it's one of the most common avenues that keeps someone tied to their narcissist is when they have to co-parent. I would argue that narcissists don't really co-parent, but we still continue to try. There usually does have to be some kind of communication if you share children, minor children, with someone. Sometimes we work with narcissists, so it's not always easy to get away, especially maybe if they're immediate family members that we're going to see time to time. In cases like this, I would recommend doing the gray rock method. I have several videos on that, which I'll also link below if you want to check that out. Really, it helps us kind of numb our emotions to the narcissist. We're not reacting emotionally, we're reacting more based on logic, and we have very, very strict boundaries that we enforce when we are communicating with the narcissist that are very important to keep in place. One of the suggestions that if we're going to do gray rock and really try to limit communication is maybe only responding one avenue. So maybe only responding or talking with the narcissist through email. And if you're going to do email, in that case, I would recommend creating like a separate email account just for communications, because narcissists sometimes will misuse, they'll misuse really any method of contact if they're able to. But then we have to intentionally log in, and it's not, we're not going to see when we're looking at our personal email, setting boundaries with yourself, like we're using this account and I'm only going to check it one time per day at this time, communicating that to the narcissist so they're aware and they know that they won't be checking this multiple times of the day. My next tip is that while you're in no contact with a narcissist, is to help with the support system, is to build positive relationships with other people, with healthier people. If you still have access to positive people in your life, fostering and caring for those relationships. If you're in the situation where you basically have lost your entire support system, you don't really have anyone that you can depend on, as scary as it is to try to get out there and form better connections with people. And this can be a good thing in several ways. First of all, having a good support system compiled with healthy people can really give us a sense of safety. Like, we have other people who can rely on. We might have thought for a long time we could only rely on the narcissist. This will give us access to healthy people that we can also rely on and get a sense of safety from. Secondly, this can really help repair our ideas of relationships, because a lot of times when we exit a narcissistic relationship with someone, we kind of have a tainted view on relationships, and this can kind of help us relearn that not all relationships hurt, they're not always abusive, that we can and are capable of forming healthy bonds with other people, which kind of feeds into tip number 5, doing reflective work on ourselves, realizing what our traits and vulnerabilities are and like why we got into the relationship we got to in the first place. And this can really be done in the form of seeing a good therapist that really knows about narcissism and domestic violence, toxic personalities, to really explore like, okay, why did I end up in this situation? Like, what can I work on within myself to make sure that I don't end up in this situation again? Doing that inner work will help us regain a sense of self-esteem, of self-worth, all the things that we lost in the relationship with the narcissist. And I do have another video that I made a while back that I really dive into the topic on how to take your power back after narcissistic abuse, really touching on themes of authenticity, becoming our authentic self as a way to really bring back our feelings of self-worth. So I'll make sure I link that down below so you can check that video out too, because it's really important. And the last tip I'm going to talk about in this video is really working on setting boundaries with yourself when it comes to relationships with other people. So like what you expect in your next relationship, for example, or going forward in your current relationships that you have in your life. So this requires getting out that dusty journal and writing down what you will and will not accept. Like, I will not accept someone that calls me names. I refuse to be questioned every time I leave the house. I refuse to be told what I can and cannot wear. I will not reach out to someone just because I'm feeling desperate for connection. And then also making a separate list about what you do want in a relationship. I want to be treated with respect. I want someone who listens to me and validates my opinion. I want someone who supports me in my life goals. I deserve love and respect. Keep these lists and read them anytime that you're feeling desperate to reach out to the narcissist or the abuser. And you might not believe it right now, but you absolutely deserve someone that respects you. You absolutely deserve someone that is going to support you in your goals, and you do not need to be in a relationship where you're being verbally, emotionally, physically, financially abused ever again. Thanks for watching this video. If you like it, if you found value in it, make sure you give it a thumbs up. It really does help support my videos and this channel. If you have not yet, make sure you hit the subscribe button. I'm going to be releasing and doing more videos on narcissism, more videos on toxic relationships. So if that's your thing, if you want more education, guidance, make sure you subscribe to my channel. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.